Let's talk about the calendar a little bit. Two major sticking points here with the college football calendar. And Tom and I were talking about this a little bit off air before we got on. But talking about first about the portal. Majority of coaches want a 10-day portal period in early January. Many administrators, as well as coaches in the Big Ten, are supporting an April portal date. This is from Ross Dellinger, by the way, as a way to more align the portal with the academic calendar, which ends in May, and a school's new revenue sharing cap, which ends in June. Now, we have got our thoughts on the cap, which, we don't have to necessarily revisit. But I'm not a fan of a spring portal window for the very reason of I think it's asinine and stupid to go through an entire spring of introducing new guys to your roster and then have a transfer portal. If that's the case, I almost think you have to move spring football to the summer, right? Move it to May, which then at that point you're out of school. So how does that work? I don't know that it does. But some split thoughts here. To me, the January window just makes the most sense. You then get your workouts in the winter done. You get your spring football done. But I understand the thought of trying to align it more with an academic calendar and trying to align it more with your new year of revenue, right? Most programs run from July 1st to January 30th as a fiscal calendar. So I kind of understand that thought. I think a spring portal window, if you're just going to have one, is asinine. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on the portal there.
I prefer the portal immediately after the playoff because, granted, the spring game is dying, and if that completely goes away, yeah, I'd understand that being there in the spring. But if you're already starting winter workouts, spring ball, as long as they stay intact the way they are, getting the transfer portal out of the way once the entirety of the playoff is done, not in the middle of it, any of that stuff, after the national championship, that would be my vote for the portal.
Full agreement with Tom. You allow players to stay through the roster all the way up until the national championship. When they are eliminated, they have a 14-day period to enter the portal if they so choose. And at that point, it allows you to build your roster in that substantial value. Because let's just say it this way. Again, a Malik Murphy back in 2023 or Bro Pabula last year in 2024. Anything happens to a Drew Aller or to a Quinn Ewers, you're down one of the more significant players that might give you an opportunity to not only win a national title and keep your hopes alive, but also boost their NIL value. Like, imagine if Bo Pabula had to come in and face off against Notre Dame and he leads Penn State to a national title appearance. Even if you get Drew Aller back in that game, well, Bo Pabula at that point has at least earned an extra $1 million because of look at what he did sitting on the bench the entire year and getting the opportunity to play. So I am in agreement with Tom. It should be right after the college football playoff comes to a conclusion. You should have anywhere between 10 to 14 days to decide if you're entering the portal. And I think you should have no longer than 10 days to figure out where you're going next, which is going to be a very busy period for a lot of coaches. But let's just call it as is. Most college football coaches live in their office these days throughout the months of January all the way up until June.
Yeah, they get paid enough to where I don't care how much they have to work. The other sticking point, a June signing day. Ian Ross's article, is this a must with a cap model? I kind of think so because it could make sense from the salary cap angle. However, why I don't like this is if you sign guys in June or July, you are missing, and I've spoken with Mike Norvell about this directly, you are missing the entire data point that is their senior year. How many guys rise through the rankings? How many guys, have great senior years that impacts the amount that they're sought after? How many guys absolutely fall off a cliff their senior year or unfortunately get hurt their senior year that then impacts their ability to play or where they can play at the next level? And then what about just the needs of your team changing, right? If you have a quarterback or a running back that gets hurt and is going to come back for another year, does that change what your board looks like through the year? I don't love the idea of a June or July signing period. I think that's counterintuitive to the way that our sport works. I think that guys' senior years are a massive data point, probably the largest data point when signing a recruit and wanting to continue to pursue a recruit. So I don't love that. But again, from a salary cap standpoint, if your fiscal year starts over on July 1st, how do you allocate resources for your December signing class? So I guess I kind of understand why some coaches would push for a summer signing period. I think in practicality, it's pretty stupid.
I agree with the complications there. To your point about losing the data point of the senior year, and you're also seeing so many more players reclassify and trying to wrap up their studies quickly at the high school level so they can get on campus by May or June, and that being their freshman year as opposed to waiting another calendar year. So I agree, it's another tough thing. Unfortunately, like it does feel like if you just crammed it all into January, that would probably be best, but that sounds like a nightmare for recruiting departments.
There's not a really big win here because of if you do, there's another way you can go about it. Like if you were to say, hey, the signing day is in June. Are we talking about the signing day for players after their senior season, or are we talking about going
into their senior season?
And that's where I completely disagree. But there also is no win point there because of, let's say it was after your senior season, you commit in June before you get on campus. What if there are some players that want to be early enrollees? You take that out of the context completely because of they can't arrive until the beginning of June. So there's not a win-win here. And also, here's going to be the other thing. You're going to see a lot of these players that end up hitting their mark and over exceeding in their senior years. They're going to go back to the collectives and say, hey, I'm technically not on campus. I'm just committed to you. I only signed my letter of intent. Now you are got to pay me a little bit more in NIL collectives, because why would I stay here when another program is going to want to tamper with me and bring me in for an extra $2 million? So there's not a win-win formula when it comes to this type of model. And I don't think it's ever going to work in that vicinity. I think that there should be one signing period, but I also think that signing period should be in the month of January or in late December. And then you decide right then and there, do you want to be an early enrollee? I'm sorry, that just feels like the most easy step pathway.
The toughest thing to me is that they align it so much with the school calendar, and we need to probably get to a point where we get away from that, right? I know that's maybe not popular. I know that some people really put an emphasis on academics, and I have no problem with that. I have never stood outside of a classroom while kids took a test and cheered for them to do well. Not that I want them to fail tests or anything like that, but I don't really care about the academic side, just to be very frank. And again, people might not like that. They might like it. I don't really care. But I do think, it probably just needs to be separated away. Or is it that hard to create a waiver for somebody to transfer in mid-January, past the drop ad date? Like if you've got to align it to a school calendar, make the transfer window early and let guys jump in on January 15th, if that's what or January 30th, right? Is it that big of a deal that they miss 2 weeks of classes? Most of them likely aren't going to half of them.